Good day everyone. I am Jeff Lorty Pangalao, a third-year BS Civil Engineering, and for today's video, I am going to discuss to you Item 103, Structure Excavation. So, this item shall consist of the necessary excavation for foundation of bridges, culverts, under drains, and other structures not otherwise provided for in the specification. So, except as otherwise provided for pipe culverts, the backfilling of completed structures and the disposal of all excavated surplus materials shall be in accordance with these specifications and in reasonably close conformity with the plans or as established by the engineer. These items shall include necessary diverting of live streams, bailing, pumping, draining, sheeting, bracing, and the necessary construction of cribs and cofferdams and furnishing materials therefore, and the subsequent removal of cribs and cofferdams and the placing of all necessary backfill. It shall also include the furnishing and placing of approved foundation fill materials to replace unsuitable material encountered below the foundation elevations of structures. No allowance will be made for classification of different types of materials encountered. So let's proceed to item 103.2, which is the construction requirements. Item 103.2.1, clearing and grubbing. Prior to starting excavation operations in any area, all necessary clearing and grubbing in that area shall have been performed in accordance with item 100, clearing and grubbing. So, this means the removal of all surface objects, brush, roots, and other protruding obstructions. So, let's proceed to item 103.2, which is the excavation. First is the general or the all structures. The contractor shall notify the engineer sufficiently in advance of the beginning of any excavation so that cross-sectional elevations and measurements may be taken on the undisturbed ground. So, the natural ground adjacent to the structure shall not be disturbed without permissions of the engineer. So, trenches or foundation pits for structure or structure footings shall be excavated to the lines and grades or elevations shown on the plans or as staked by the engineer. So they shall be of sufficient size to permit the placing of structure or structure footings of the full width and length shown. The elevations of the bottom of footings as shown on the plans shall be considered as approximate only on the engineer may order. And in writing, such changes in dimensions or elevations of footings as may be deemed necessary to secure a satisfactory foundation. So, boulders, lags, and other objectionable material encountered in excavation shall be removed. So, after each excavation is completed, the contractor shall notify the engineer to that effect and footing. Bedding material or pipe culvert shall be placed until the engineer has approved the depth, excavation, and the character of the foundation material. So next, let's proceed to the structure other than pipe culverts. So all rock or other hard foundation materials shall be cleaned, all loose materials and cut to a firm surface, either level, stepped, or serrated as directed by the engineer. All seams or crevices shall be cleaned and grouted. All loose and disintegrated rocks and thin strata shall be removed. When the footing is to rest on material other than rock, excavation to final grade shall not be made until just before the footing is to be placed. So when the foundation material is soft or mucky or otherwise unsuitable, as determined by the engineer, the contractor shall remove the unsuitable material and backfill with approved granular material. So this foundation fill shall be placed and compacted in 150 mm or 6 inches layers up to the foundation elevation. Third is the pipe culvert. So the width of the pipe trench shall be sufficient to permit satisfactory jointing of the pipe and thorough tamping of the bedding material around the pipe. So where rock, hard pan, or other unyielding material is encountered, it shall be removed below the foundation grade for a depth of at least 300 mm or 4 mm. For each 100 millimeter of fill over the top of pipe, whichever is greater, but not to exceed 3/4 of the vertical inside diameter of the pipe. The width of the excavation shall be at least 300 mm, 12 inches greater than the horizontal outside diameter of the pipe. So the excavation below grade shall be backfilled with selected fine compressible material such as silty clay or loam and lightly compacted in layer not over 150 mm or 6 inches in uncompacted depth to form a uniform but yielding foundation. So next, let's proceed to item 103.2.3. So it is about the utilization of excavation material. So all excavated material so far as suitable shall be utilized as backfill or embankment. The surplus material shall be disposed of in such manner as not to obstruct the stream or otherwise impair the efficiency or appearance of the structure. So there is no excavated materials shall be deposited at any time so as to endanger the partly finished structure. So next, let's proceed to item 103.2.4. So it is the cofferdams. So suitable and practically watertight cofferdams shall be used wherever water-bearing strata are encountered above the elevation of the bottom of the excavation. So if requested, the contractor shall submit drawings showing his proposed method of cofferdam structure as directed by the engineer. So this cofferdams is an enclosure built within a body of water to allow the enclosed area to be pumped out. So cofferdams or cribs for foundation construction shall in general be carried well below the bottom of the footings and shall be well braced and as nearly watertight as practicable. So in general, The interior dimensions of cofferdams shall be as to give sufficient clearance for the construction of forms and the inspection of their exteriors, and to permit pumping outside of the forms. So cofferdams or cribs which are tilted or moved literally during the process of sinking shall be righted or enlarged so as to provide the necessary clearance. So cofferdams shall be constructed so as to protect green concrete against damage from sudden rising of the stream and to prevent damage to the foundation of erosion. So, no timber or bracing shall be left in cofferdams or cribs in such a way as to extend into substructure masonry without written permission from the engineer. So, any pumping that may be permitted from the interior of any foundation enclosure shall be done in such a manner as to preclude the possibility of any portion of the concrete material. So next, let's proceed to item 103.2.5, which is the preservation of channels. So unless otherwise permitted, no excavation shall be made outside of caissons, cribs, cofferdam, or sheet piling, and the natural stream bed adjacent to structure shall not be disturbed without permission from the engineer. So if any excavation or dredging is made at the side of the structure before caissons, cribs, or cofferdams are sunk in place, the contractor shall, after the foundation base is in place, so backfill all such excavation to the original ground surface or stream bed with material satisfactory to the engineer. So next, let's proceed to item 2.6, which is the backfill and embankment for structure other than pipe culvert. So excavated areas around structures shall be backfilled with free draining granular material approved by the engineer and placed in horizontal layer not over 150 millimeter or 6 inches. So in thickness to the level of the original ground surface, each layer shall be moistened or dried as required and thoroughly compacted with mechanical tampers. In placing backfills or embankment, the material shall be placed simultaneously in so far as possible to approximately the same elevation at both sides of an abutment, pier, or wall. If condition requires placing backfill or embankment appreciably higher on one side than on the opposite side, the additional material on the higher side shall not be placed until the masonry has been in place for 14 days or until test made by the laboratory under the supervision of the engineer. And then backfill or embankment shall not be placed behind the walls of concrete culverts or abutments or rigid from structures until the top slab is placed and cured. So backfilled and embankment behind abutments shields at the top of the superstructure and behind the side walls of culvert shall not be carried up simultaneously behind opposite abutments or side walls. So next, let's proceed to item 103.2.7 or the bedding, backfill, and embankment for pipe. So this bedding, backfill, and embankment for pipe culverts shall be done in accordance with item 500, pipe culverts and storm drain. So now let's proceed to item 103.3, method of measurement. Under this is the item 103.3.1, which is the structure excavation. So the volume of excavation to be paid for will be the number of cubic meters measured in original position of materials acceptably excavated in conformity with the plans or as directed by the engineer. But in no case, except as noted, will any of the following volumes will be made include in the measurement of the payment. So, for you to know, this structure excavation means excavation in all materials of whatever nature encountered for the construction of pump station, tanks, structure, and building, and other structures. So, under this is the volume outside the vertical planes 450 millimeters or 18 inches outside of and parallel to the neat lines of footings and inside wall pipe and pipe arc culverts at their widest horizontal dimension. Next is the volume of excavation for culverts and section outside the vertical plane for culverts stipulated in number 1. So, third is the volume outside of neat lines of under drains as shown on the plans and outside the limits of foundation fill as ordered by the engineer. Fourth is the volume included within the stake limits of the roadway excavation, contiguous channel changes, ditches, etc., for which payment is otherwise provided in the specification. So, fifth is the volume of water or other liquid resulting from construction operations and which can be pumped or drained away. Sixth is the volume of any excavation performed prior to the taking of elevations and measurements of the undisturbed ground. Next is the volume of any material rehandled except that where the plans indicate or the engineer directs the excavation after embankment has been placed, and except that when installation of pipe culverts by the imperfect trench method specified in item 500 is required, a volume of material re-excavated as directed will be included. And lastly, the volume of excavation for footings ordered at a depth more than 1.5 meter or 60 inches below the lowest elevation for such footing shown on the original contract plans, unless the bill of quantities contain a pay item for excavation ordered below the elevation shown on the plans for individual footings. So next, let's proceed to item 103.3.2. Bridges excavation. So the volume of excavation designated in the plans or in the special provisions as bridge excavation will be measured as described below and will be kept separate for pay purpose from the excavation for all structures. So the volume of the bridge excavation to be paid shall be vertical 450 millimeter or 18 inches outside of and parallel to the neat lines of the footings. So next, let's proceed to item 103.3.3. So, which is the foundation fill. So, the volume of foundation fill to be paid for will be the number of cubic meters measurement in final position of this special granular material actually provided and placed below the foundation elevation of structure as specified, complete, in place, and accepted. Or once initial concrete has been laid, the foundations are filled by directly pouring the concrete. So next, let's proceed to item 103.3.4, which is the shoring, cribbing, and related work. So shoring, cribbing, and related work, whenever included as a pay item in bill of quantities, will be paid for at the lump sum bid price. So this work shall include furnishing, constructing, maintaining, and removing any and all shoring, cribbing, cofferdams, caissons, bracing, sheeting, water control, and other operations necessary for the acceptable completion of excavation included in the work of the section to a depth of 1.5 meter below the lowest elevation shown on the plans for each separable foundation structure. And next is item 103.3.5, which is the basis of payment. So the accepted quantities measured as prescribed in section 103.3 shall be paid for at the contract unit price for each of the particular pay items listed below that is included in the bill of quantities. So the payment shall constitute full compensation for the removal and disposal of excavated materials, including all labor, equipment, tools, and incidentals necessary to complete the work prescribed in this item, except as follows. So 1. Any excavation for footings ordered at a depth more than 1.5 meter below the lowest elevation shown on the original contract plans will be paid for as provided in Part K measurement and payment, unless pay item for excavation ordered below plan elevation appears in the bill of quantities. Any roadway or barrow excavation required in excess of the quantity excavated for structures will be measured and paid for as provided under item 102. Fourth, shoring, cribbing, and related work required for excavation ordered more than 1.5 meter or 60 inches below plan elevation will be paid for in accordance with Part K. So here is the payment will be made under. So the pay item number 103.1 or the structure excavation with a unit of measurement of cubic meter, while the item number 103.2 or the bridge excavation with a unit of measurement of cubic meter, and item number 103.3 or the foundation fill with the cubic meter, the item number 103.4 or the excavation ordered below plan elevation with the cubic meter, and item number 103.5 the shoring, cribbing, and related work with the unit of measurement of lump sum, and lastly item number 103.6, which is the pipe, culverts, and drain excavation with the unit of measurement of cubic meter. So now let's proceed to our next topic, which is item number 104 or the embankment. So item number 104.1, this item shall consist of the construction of embankment in accordance with this specification and conformity with the lines, grades, and dimensions shown on the plans or established by the engineer. So item number 104.2, which is the material requirements. So embankments shall be constructed of suitable materials in consonance with the following definitions. So first is the suitable material, which is the material that is acceptable in accordance with a contract and which can be compacted in the manner specified in this item. So it can be common material or rock. So this suitable material is morally suitable. And next is the unsuitable material. So this material other than suitable material, such as material containing detrimental quantities of organic materials such as grass, roots, and sewerage. Next is the organic soil such as peat and muck. Soils with liquid limit exceeding 80 or plasticity index exceeding 55. Next is the soil with a natural water content exceeding 100%. And soil with very low natural density or 800 kilogram per meter cube or lower. And next and lastly is the soils that cannot be properly compacted as determined by the engineer. Next item is the item number 104.3, or the construction requirements. Under this is the item number 104.3.1. It is the general. The prior to construction of embankment, all necessary clearing and grubbing in that area shall have been performed in conformity with item 100, which is the clearing and grubbing. And the embankment construction shall consist of constructing roadway embankments, including preparations of the areas upon which they are to be placed. So the construction of dikes within or adjacent to roadway, or the placing and compacting of approved material within roadway areas where unsuitable material has been removed, and the placing and compacting of embankment material in holes, pits, and other depressions within roadway area. And then the embankments and backfill shall contain no muck, pit, sod, roots, or other deleterious matter, rocks, broken concrete, or other solid, bulky material shall not be placed in embankment areas where piling is to be placed or driven. So, where shown on the plans or directed by the engineer, the surface of the existing ground shall be compacted to a depth of 150 mm or 6 inches and to the specified requirements of this item. So next is the item number 104.3.2, or the methods of construction, where there is evidence of discrepancies on the actual elevations, and that's shown on the plans. Pre-construction survey referred to the datum plane used in the approved plan shall be undertaken by the contractor under the control of the engineer to serve as basis for the computation of the actual volume of the embankment materials. Next, when embankment is to be placed and compacted on hillsides, or when new embankment is to be compacted against existing embankments, or when embankment is built one half width at a time. So the existing slopes that are steeper than 3:1 when measured at right angles to the roadway shall be continuously benched over those areas as the work is brought up in layers. So next is when shoulder excavation is specified. So the roadway shoulder shall be excavated to the depth and width shown on the plan. So the shoulder material shall be removed without disturbing the adjacent existing based on coarse material. So now let's proceed to the next, where embankment is to be constructed across low swampy grounds that will not support the mass of trucks or other hauling equipment. The lower part of the field may be constructed by dumping successive loads in uniformly distributed layers of thickness, not greater than necessary to support the hauling equipment, while placing subsequent layers. Next, let's proceed to item 104 3.3, or the compaction. So under this is the compaction trials, which before commencing the formation of the embankments, the contractor shall submit in writing to the engineer for approval his proposal for the compaction of each type of fill materials to be used in the work. So the proposal shall include the relationship between the types of compaction equipments and the number of passes required and the method of adjusting moisture content. So throughout the periods when the compaction of earthwork in progress, the contractor shall adhere to the compaction procedures found from compaction trials for each type of material being compacted. So each type of compaction equipment employed and each degree of compaction specified. Under the compaction is the earth. Here is the earth. So the contractor shall compact the material placed in all embankment layers and the material sacrificed to the designated depth below subgrade in cut sections until a uniform density of not less than 95 mass percent of the maximum dry density determined by AASHTO or AH2 299 method C is attained at a moisture content determined by engineer to be suitable for such densities. The acceptance of compaction may be based on adherence to an approved roller pattern developed as set forth in item 106 compaction equipment and density control strips. And at least one group of 3 C2 density tests shall be carried out for each 500 meter of each layer of compacted fill. Under the compaction also, here is the rock. So embankment material classified as rock shall be deposited, spread, and leveled the full width of the fill with sufficient earth or other fine material. So deposited to fill the interstices to produce a dense compact embankments. So in addition with this, one of the rollers, vibrators, or compactor meeting the requirements set forth in subsection 106.2.1, or the compaction equipment, shall compact the embankment full width with a minimum of 3 complete passes for each layer of embankment. So now let's proceed to item 104.3.4, or the protection of roadbed during construction. So during the construction of the roadway, the roadbed shall be maintained in such condition that it will be well drained at all times. Side ditches or gutters emptying from cuts to embankment or otherwise shall be constructed as to avoid damage to embankments by erosion. And now let's proceed to item number 104.3.5, or the protection of structure. So if embankment can be deposited on one side only of abutments, wing walls, piers, or culverts, head walls, care shall be taken that the area immediately adjacent to the structure is not compacted to the extent that it will cause overturning of or excessive pressure against the structure. So, we noted on the plans, the field adjacent to the end bent of a bridge shall not be placed higher than the bottom of the backfill. And now, let's proceed to item 104.3.6 or the rounding and warping slope. So, rounding except in solid rock, the tops and bottoms of all slopes, including the slopes of drainage ditches, shall be rounded as indicated on the plan. So, a layer of earth overlaying rock shall be rounded above the rock as done in earth plan. So, warping. So, adjustment in slope shall be made to avoid injury in standing trees or marring of weathered rock, or to harmonize with existing landscape feature, and the transition to such adjusted slopes shall be gradual. So, at intersections of cuts and fields, slopes shall be adjusted and warped to flow into each other or into the natural ground surfaces without noticeable break. So, let's proceed to item 104.3.7, which is the finishing roadbed and slope. So, after the roadbed has been substantially completed, the full width shall be conditioned by removing any soft or other unstable material that will not compact properly or serve the intended purpose. The resulting areas and all other lost sections, holes, or depressions shall be brought to grade with suitable selected material. So, scarifying, blading, dragging, rolling, or other methods of work shall be performed or used as necessary to provide a thoroughly compacted roadbed shape to the grades and cross-section shows on the plans or as staked by the engineer. So, next is item number 104.3.8 or the serrated slope. So, cut slopes in rippable material or soft rock having slope ratios between 0.75 ratio of 1 and 2 ratio of 1 shall be constructed so that the final slope line shall consist of series of small horizontal steps. So, the step rise and tread dimension shall be shown on the plan. So, no scaling shall be performed on the steep slopes except for removal of large rocks, which will obviously be safety hazard if they fall into the ditch line or roadway. So, next is item number 104.3.9 or the earth berms. So, when called for the contract, permanent earth beam shall be constructed of well-graded material with no rocks having a diameter greater than 0.25 the height of the beam. So, when local material is not acceptable material shall be imported. So, as directed by, of course, the engineer. So, under the earth berms is the compacted berms. So, compacted berm construction shall be consist of moistening or drying and placing material as necessary in locations shown in the drawings or as established by the engineer. So, material shall contain no frozen material, roots, sod, or other deleterious material. So, contractor shall take precaution to prevent materials from escaping over the embankment slope. So shoulder surface beneath berm will be roughened to provide a bond between the berm and shoulder when completed. So next is the uncompacted berm. If we have compacted berm, we also have this uncompacted berm. Construction shall consist of drying if necessary and placing material in location shown on the plans as established by the engineer. So material shall contain no frozen material, roots, sod, or other deleterious material. So contractor shall take precautions to prevent material from escaping over the embankment slope. So next is item number 104.4, or the method of measurement. So the quantity of embankment to be paid for shall be the volume of material compacted in place, accepted by the engineer and formed with material obtained from any source. So, material from excavation per item 102, which is used in embankment and accepted by the engineer, will be paid under embankment, and such payment will be deemed to include the cost of excavating, hauling, stockpiling, and all other costs incidental to the work. So material for selected barrow topping will be measured and paid for under the same condition specified in the preceding paragraph. Lastly, item number 104.5, or the basis of payment. So the accepted quantities measured as prescribed in section 104.4 shall be paid for the contract unit price for each of the pay item listed below that is included in the bill of quantity. So the payment shall continue full compensation for placing and compacting all materials, including all labor, equipment, tool, incidental necessary to complete the work prescribed in this item. So here is the payment. Pay item number 104.1, or the embankment, which is the unit of measurement is cubic meter. While the item number 104.2, the selected barrow for topping, or the case number 1, unit of measurement is also a cubic meter. While item number 104.3, selected barrow for topping, or the case number 2, the unit of measurement still is cubic meter. And lastly, the item 104.4, or the earth berm, which is the unit of measurement is meter. And that's all. I will end my discussion here, and thank you for listening.